1978 was a bad year for crime and violence. In Guyana, an extraordinary mass suicide took place as the Reverend Jim Jones persuaded 913 of his followers to drink poison. In Florida, at the beginning of the year, police arrested Theodore Bundy, who turned out to have killed at least 23 young women. And near Chicago, in December, there was a lot of activity in and around number 8213 West Somerdale Avenue in suburban Norwood Park Township. For weeks now, neighbors had been aware that police cars had been staking it out, but they could not guess why. Then a shock ran through the neighborhood as these bodies were carried out. Rumors flew that they were boys who'd been murdered, that there had been gay orgies, that there were dozens of bodies under the house and lawn, some of which had been there for 6 years. Incredibly, the rumors were all true. The man who lived alone in the house was John Wayne Gacy. He was a roly-poly building contractor, known as a worker for charity, an ex-member of the Junior Chamber of Commerce, a pillar of the local Democratic Party, who sometimes dressed up as a clown to entertain the kids in the hospital. He was no trouble to anyone, as the police soon discovered when they talked to his neighbors, like Edward Grexa.
Never a sound, not a sound, never. Not even, you know, like they've asked about screaming or anything. Never a sound out of that house. It's always been a quiet house.
As his house and lawn were slowly torn apart in the search for more bodies, so his reputation disintegrated too. People who had been pleased to accept his donations and assistance now regretted the day they had their photograph taken shaking his hand. People like the mayor of Chicago, Michael Bilandic. But even the mother of one of the victims remembered her son's high opinion of John Gacy.
He was a very nice man to work for, and he liked the kids. And my son told me he was a politician, and he says, boy, if you stick with that guy, you could go far. He's got a lot of connections. See, and this is what the boys liked about him.
For charity, Gacy transformed himself into Pogo the Clown. And he had organized 3 events for President Jimmy Carter's re-election fund, where an embarrassing photo of him with the First Lady, Rosalind Carter, was taken. Still, the bodies emerged from their ghastly burial place. The search, briefly suspended for the 2 days of Christmas, had uncovered 18 young men by the 27th of December. The public read those gruesome headlines in disbelief. It was no surprise that when the trial of John Gacy began 15 months later, 3/4 of the jurors entered the courtroom believing Gacy was insane. After all, what normal person could live quietly in such a house of horrors? The defense fought hard to reinforce that opinion, even suggesting that Gacy had buried some of his victims while they were still alive. But as we'll see in this edition of American Justice, the prosecutors fought back with evidence that Gacy had methodically planned every grisly murder. They painted a picture of a master manipulator, a sadistic killer who for years hid his evil nature behind the guise of a good neighbor and loyal citizen. American Justice will return in a moment with John Wayne Gacy. We now return to John Wayne Gacy here on A&E. In early 1979, as police investigators were still removing bodies from the home of John Wayne Gacy, the once respected builder was confessing to still more murders, telling officials where they could find his victims. The police were now bringing in heavy digging equipment to ensure that no part of the property was left unsearched. John Gacy's world started to fall apart at 11:30 p.m. on the 11th of December, when Elizabeth Peast went to the Des Plaines police station. She asked them to check on her 15-year-old son, Robert, who had been missing since 9 o'clock. Robert had been in a local pharmacy when Gacy approached him and talked about needing boys to work for him. Robert told his mother he was going to see a man about a job. When she telephoned the pharmacy, they mentioned John Gacy. Contacted on the phone by the police, Gacy said, "I know the kid is missing, but that's not important to me." He was asked to go to the police station and finally arrived in the middle of the night, covered with mud. When they searched Gacy's home, the police didn't find Robert Piest, but they did find a vital clue, a receipt for film from the pharmacy. It had been in the boy's pocket. The police staked out his home and followed him in his car. After a week of this pressure, Gacy boldly invited two of the officers in to have breakfast with him. The policeman noticed a rotten smell. Gacy's explanation was that he had unplugged his sump pump. Dissatisfied with his explanation, the police returned with a search warrant and opened the trap door into the crawl space beneath the house. Water had softened the dirt and disturbed what was buried there. To their horror, the police found 3 bodies and parts of others. Arrested and charged with murder, Gacy finally admitted to more than 30 victims, mostly young men in their teens. He confessed to luring them to his house, usually with promises of jobs, although some were male prostitutes he picked up in Chicago's homosexual areas. Day after day, the headlines reported new and horrifying totals. Soon Gacy was describing what he had done to his victims. Once he got them back home, he would ply them with liquor and offer to show them magic tricks. These would involve handcuffs, which he would refuse to take off, and then ropes he put round their necks. At this point, he would start enjoying himself sexually and finally throttle them, some with a rosary, others with a tourniquet he had made out of a board and ropes. Then he would bury them in the crawl space, and when that got full, under the lawn. But even there, he ran out of room. The last 5 bodies of the 33 Gacy is known to have killed, he simply shoved into his car and threw off a bridge into the Des Plaines River. Robert Piest was one of those, which was why Gacy had been so late in reporting to the police station and why his clothes were so muddy. The bodies were all dredged from the riverbed. Suddenly anxious to be as helpful as he could, John Gacy drew a map of the crawl space, showing where the bodies were buried, and he agreed to go back to the house to point out to the digging team where to work. Now investigators began to piece together the background of this mass murderer. Named after John Wayne, the film star, John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago in 1942. As a child, he was frequently beaten by his alcoholic father and abused by at least one of the family friends. He became a shoe salesman and married a colleague whose father set him up as manager of a Kentucky Fried Chicken chain in Waterloo, Iowa. Now he had a source of young men coming to work for him, and he lured several of them into a back room where he would handcuff them and demand sex before he would let them go. One of them escaped and went to the police. The apparently successful and popular young businessman was arrested. On the 28th of December, 1968, 10 years to the day before Robert Piest's body was dragged from the Des Plaines River, the 26-year-old Gacy drew a 10-year jail sentence from Judge Peter Van Meter. But he had no previous convictions and was a model prisoner, so he served only 18 months. His wife filed for divorce, and as soon as he was out of jail, he moved to Chicago and started a construction business. He was arrested again for picking up a teenage boy for sex, but was released when the boy wouldn't appear in court. Little of this leaked out, and his career again seemed to be prospering. In Chicago, he met up with an old flame, Carol Hoff. On the 1st of June, 1972, Gacy married again, and she moved into his house. Friends who attended the reception recalled that there was an odd smell. Gacy explained that water kept leaking into his crawl space. His marriage didn't go well, and he began to beat his wife. Then he started to cruise Chicago's gay areas more openly and was interested in attractive boys like John Butkovich, who worked for him. Gacy and the boy had an argument, and Butkovich vanished. More boys, like Sam Stapleton, age 14, disappeared. Boys like Rick Johnston, 15, whose mother had dropped him off at a pop concert, and another employee, Greg Grodzik. His parents employed a private eye who couldn't find any trace of him. Greg's friend, John Zick, also disappeared. His ring was found at the house. Gacy's violence became too much for his wife, Carol, and she left. Between July and December 1977, another 8 boys were murdered. Among them, Matthew Ronan and Robert Gilroy, who lived just 4 blocks away, the son of a Chicago police sergeant. Robert Winch, age 16, went off to visit a friend and was never seen again. John Wayne Gacy will return in a moment here on A&E. To John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy killed 33 people in 6 years, but the police had never realized there was a serial killer in their midst. Gacy had actually been arrested on the 6th of January, 1978, for sexually abusing a boy at gunpoint, but he was released when he claimed that the youth was a willing participant. After these facts came out, the police tried to explain how his murders had gone undetected for so long.
When we in the Chicago Police Department first became aware of this gentleman 2 years ago, we put him under surveillance for over 30-some days, and we could never have, we never established probable cause that he was committing an offense.
Even more extraordinary was what happened after he made a pickup near this expressway. Jeff Rignall, the victim, later spoke out.
I walked out of our apartment building, and which has a circular drive, and he headed me off at the sidewalk and commented on my suntan, of which I had just come back from Florida, and offered me to smoke a joint, and because it was cold, and I said sure, and I hopped in the car.
Gacy chloroformed Rignall and subjected him to a night of rape and torture. Then he dumped him, bleeding but alive, in a Chicago park. When Rignall went to the police, they told him the chances of finding his attacker were almost 0. Rignall stubbornly staked out the expressway exit until he spotted Gacy's car. He traced the license plate number and sued Gacy in civil court. When Gacy countersued, Rignall settled for $3,000. Free to pursue more victims, Gacy grabbed 19-year-old Frank Landigan, who was thrown over the Kankakee Bridge into the river, as were Tim O'Rourke, James Mazzara, and Robert Peast, the killing that finally caught him. When he was arrested, Gacy tried to kill himself. He had to be strapped down and continually watched, while the Chicago authorities began legal proceedings.
The Cook County Grand Jury this afternoon returned 7 indictments, charging John Gacy with the murders of 7 persons who have disappeared since the July of 1975.
He's on another line, the sergeant is. Would you care to hold?
From all over the country came calls from parents of missing teenagers wondering if their sons could be among the victims. The gruesome task of attempting to put together what was left of the bodies was a slow and painstaking one. Pieces of bone had to be found, tagged, assembled, and identified. Relatives of missing teenagers were asked to send dental records because in many cases this would be the only way to identify the bodies. Using the skulls found under the house, forensic scientists mocked up dozens of possible projections of what the faces would have looked like. In April 1979, 8213 West Summerdale was demolished as being unsafe. Actually, it had become such a magnet for sightseers and a depressor of real estate values, the rest of the district demanded its removal. The neighbors watched in relief. It was more than a year before the case came to trial. The first task was to find a jury unbiased by all the media coverage. Granting the defense request for a change of venue, trial judge Louis Garippo took a novel approach in picking a jury in Rockford, Illinois, 2 hours from Chicago. William Kunkel, one of the Gacy prosecutors, is now a partner at the Chicago law firm of Pope and John. He picks up the story.
And what Judge Garippo did was had himself assigned by the Supreme Court as a judge of that district. We went up to Winnebago County, selected the jury up there. Once the jury was sworn, he was transferred back to the Cook County District. The jurors were bussed in. It was going to be a sequestered jury by defense request anyway. So the thinking was, if you're going to lock them up in a hotel, you might as well lock them up in a hotel in Chicago as lock them up in Rockford.
Gacy's lawyer, Sam Emiranti, didn't deny the murders, but decided that his client should plead insanity due to multiple personalities. On the 6th of February, 1980, the trial began at the Criminal Courts Building in Chicago. The lawyers made their opening statements in front of Judge Garippo, who had been one of the prosecutors in the case of Richard Speck, who killed 8 student nurses in 1966. Everyone who entered the courtroom was searched for weapons. For much of the trial, Gacy listened impassively to the catalog of evil. Defense lawyer Sam Emiranti claimed that Gacy was the character in the novel Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, come to life. He told the jury, despite what psychiatric terms you put on it, he was so good and so bad, and the bad side of him was the personification of evil. He asked them not to decide with hate, revenge, passion, or fear, but to find Gacy not guilty by reason of insanity. The prosecution argued that Gacy knew what he was doing when he lured 33 young men into his home, and that he was totally responsible for his actions.
When he chose in advance to have trenches dug, when he had the rope ready, when he had the handcuffs ready, he knew what was coming. It was not an unexpected rage attack or brief psychotic episode. It was a plotted, planned, rational murder. And once he did it, he hid the bodies in a way that would avoid discovery. And he was successful at it. And after that, he remembered it, as he told us in his oral statements about crimes committed as long ago as 7 years earlier. In great detail, he remembered it.
The prosecution's case was that Gacy was a cold-blooded killer who was only pretending to have multiple personalities to bamboozle the jury. They contended that Bad Jack, the personality Gacy blamed for the killings, was an invention. The trial took 6 weeks, but the jury deliberations only lasted 2 hours. John Wayne Gacy was found guilty of more murders than anyone else in American history. Now the jury had to decide on the proper punishment. For the families of the victims, there seemed to be no doubt about the proper conclusion to this case.
I hope he does get the electric chair. Then it'll make everybody feel better. I'm sure it'll make the other mothers feel better, too.
Robert Peast's brother Ken agreed.
There's only one solution now.
What is that?
I want him to see him go to the chair.
The prosecution called Gacy the worst of all murderers, a man responsible for enough misery to last a century. The jury recommended the death sentence, responding to prosecutor William Kunkel's plea not to show sympathy, only justice.
What I suggested to them was that if they allowed that man, John Gacy, to walk the earth, then indeed God help us all.
The judge told the jury to make sure they were unanimous in their recommendation of the death penalty. Then he confirmed the sentence. The trial of John Wayne Gacy was over. But the book has not yet been closed on this horrifying case. On death row in Illinois, John Wayne Gacy has given press interviews, including one with Chicago reporter Walter Jacobson of WBBM TV.
Emiranti never checked out my alibi defense. My business was so finely detailed, I could tell you where I was when I was out of town, what airline I used, what car agency I used. Everything is detailed, and that's what the FBI had checked into. If I was in those states and in those towns, then how the hell could I have been here when these crimes were committed here?
Baloney. We had anywhere up to 8 signed documents from the day before, the day of, and the day after almost all of the killings that we had known dates for that would place him in the area and not out of town. So we were prepared to take on that.
I know you can be skeptic because all I'm saying is one-sided, and I'm not desperate about anything. If you don't believe any of it, then wait for the appeal.
He's trying to create the illusion that there are new issues, that there's undiscovered evidence, that there's something new to bring forward, when in fact there isn't.
I've had at least 40 people working on this, and of course nobody wants to hear it because the public was brainwashed into this monster image. Oh, Gacy did the whole thing. Gacy does this, Gacy does that. Hell, I'd have to be up 24 hours a day to do everything that I've been said to have done. I'm just as lovable and jokeable as I was back then. I have informed my attorney that if you can't get a new trial, don't stop the execution. I don't.
Really? I didn't know that.
I am dead set, because I figure if people don't want to know the truth and the honesty of it, if they want to be convinced or brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, because you will have executed somebody that didn't commit the crime.
Moments after the death sentence was handed down, John Gacy and prosecutor William Kunkel spoke for the first time in the courtroom lockup. Kunkel had avoided Gacy for the duration of the trial, but now Gacy told him that the prosecution had done a brilliant job, and he said the jury had made the right decision in finding him guilty. Gacy has since taken back those words, as he did at various times during the investigation. He has recently claimed that someone else committed the murders, and that he was merely the caretaker of the cemetery. But so far, that claim has gone unheeded by the state. More than a decade after his trial, Gacy has exhausted all but the last steps of his appeal process, and experts say he will probably be put to death in the next few years. I'm Bill Curtis. Join us next time for another episode of American Justice here on A&E.
Charles Manson, son of Sam, the Boston Strangler. Some of the most infamous criminal minds of the 20th century, explored in the series American Justice. Call 1-800-423-1212 to own a collector's set of the best of American Justice. 14 episodes packaged in this special 4-video cassette collection for $99.95, plus $5.95 shipping and handling. Call now, 1-800-423-1212.
Friday. Has killing become commonplace in our culture? Bill Curtis examines violence in the media on an all-new Investigative Reports. Now stay tuned for an all-new Spies, next on A&E.